Joining us now by phone, Florida Senator Marco Rubio. Senator, welcome back to the Pensacola Morning News, sir.
Thanks for having me on. Good morning to everybody in the Air Coast there in Pensacola, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So you're really pushing now for a paid family leave on the heels of the child tax credit. What is it that you want to be the national policy here?
Well, it's an option, right? So right now, if you make a lot of money, like if you make $300,000 a year and you work on Wall Street, you have paid family leave. If you make $35,000 or $40,000 working as a small business or in a small business or whatever, you don't. So what happens is, imagine for a moment, let's take the example of a 32-year-old woman. She's a worker, a career, a professional, $45,000, $50,000 a year. She gets pregnant and she has to take time off. She doesn't get paid for the time off. The law says they have to give you up to 12 weeks off, but doesn't mean they have to pay you. Now, if you have paid family leave during that time, it's great, but if you don't, you got a big problem. And how many people do you know that can miss one paycheck, not to mention 2 or 3? And so what this does is it creates an option. It's not a government program, right? We're not raising taxes. We're not taking money out of the Treasury. What we're telling people is if you don't have paid family leave from your employer, you will have the option of taking your part of your Social Security benefit early. So you take 6 weeks off, you can get up to 6 weeks off, or more, up to 12 weeks, but at least, 6 weeks off, you could get about over 60% of what you would make if you were going to work. And then when you retire, you'll have to retire, 10, 12 weeks later than you normally would, or you can retire at the same time and your benefit will just be slightly reduced, like if you the same as if you would retire at 62 over 65. We're not forcing anyone to do it. No one has to do it. It's just an option to take some of the money you're going to get later, take it now because you need it now, and we think it's good for families, and frankly, I mean it's good for workers, because how many people can afford to go, as I said, more than one, missing a paycheck, not to mention 2 or 3. And here's my last point on this. For those who think that this is sort of a liberal idea or whatever, a substantial percentage, for example, of mothers who take time off from work, a substantial percentage that don't have paid family leave today are forced into public assistance, meaning they get into trouble, they can't afford it, they're not working, and now they got to go and get a welfare or some other assistance from the government during that period of time because they got to pay their bills. So this is a cost saver in that respect as well.
And this is, it strikes me as an incredibly innovative program. I didn't know the details till you just explained it to me, but bringing Social Security forward in time as a way of helping families now instead of having to wait for that benefit later. As you say, it's revenue neutral because it has that essential effect. What's been the reception among senators when you've talked to them? Do you feel like you can get them enough? Because anytime you try to change anything with relation to Social Security, you always feel like this is an uphill battle to begin with. What's been the reception?
Well, so it depends, right? So I would say there's been resistance from the right for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's anything that touches Social Security, which already has fiscal problems, makes people nervous. We got to walk them through the numbers there. And the other is this traditionally been an idea that comes from the left, the notion of paid family leave. And so you got to explain to them it's not an entitlement program, it's not a government program, it's just basically allowing you to take it's your Social Security. We're just creating the option. So it's going to take a little bit of work. What I can tell you for sure is that this is not something the market is going to take care of on its own. It's just not, especially, for small businesses who can't afford to provide paid family leave. From the left, it's been typical, and that is, one of the bills that's out there, and I don't criticize anyone because, look, I'm glad they're out there working on it, but Senator Gillibrand of New York has a proposal to raise the payroll tax and use that to pay for a paid family leave. The problem is that would raise it on everyone, right. And the payroll tax is very regressive. It hits the less money you make, the bigger percentage. Everybody pays the same amount of payroll tax, and so if you make $1 million a year, you stop paying payroll tax under $200,000 or about that, just a little bit under that figure. But for someone who makes $50,000 a year, you're paying payroll tax on your whole income. So you're raising everybody's taxes to pay for the benefit of a few. This kind of keeps it isolated to those individuals. Look, I'm not telling you this solves all the problems. I'm saying it creates one more option for workers who are struggling with a need to take paid leave. And by the way, this would be available to fathers as well, because ultimately, here's what I know for sure, and that is you can't have a strong country unless we have strong families, and you can't have strong families without strong parents. And no one should be forced back to work after 2 weeks after a cesarean section because they can't afford to miss a couple paychecks. It just can't happen.
And it's going to be interesting because I've always said that conservatives are the party of the family, that the Republicans should be the party of the family, and so looking for a pro-family solution. It's interesting because you would think helping pregnant moms and even dads would be something you could get Democrats on board with, and you would think revenue neutral and owning the money that's going to be coming to you anyway would be something you get Republicans on board with, but obviously time will tell whether they buy into the concept. One of the other things that you guys are, and by the way, congratulations on what I think is a very innovative solution. I love the idea of it. One of the other things we're working on right now, obviously, the omnibus. Do you have anything in the Panhandle or that's Panhandle relevant that you're working on for spending right now?
Well, first of all, we're not on the minibus, so we're doing a number of program budgets together. And but the one we really got to get done, which we're going to be going on in August, is the defense bills. You can imagine,
right.
The Panhandle has such an enormous defense presence, and it's an important contribution to our country that it makes. And we haven't had an appropriations bill on defense in a number of years, and it's just a catastrophe in terms of long-term planning given the threats that we face. So that's obviously what we're working on very strongly and really focused on that right now. And that's really going to have an impact in the long term. And that's the one that I think, obviously, the Panhandle cares about every issue involving America and the country, but the one issue on defense appropriations that we're not on yet, that's going to be the one that really matters to the. I don't know of any area in the country, if you want to take the Panhandle starting, just west of Tallahassee all the way to Pensacola, that geographic area there, and that we call the Florida Panhandle, makes a greater contribution to America's national defense than any similar geographic area in the country. We have such unique capabilities and in that region, and that's something that we need to protect and continue to fight for.
One of the other things I wanted to ask you about, obviously President Trump is coming to Florida. He's going to do a rally for Ron DeSantis. Matt Gaetz is going to be there. It's an open question at this point whether Rick Scott's going to be there because he's caught between Adam Putnam and Ron DeSantis and not wanting to pick. Do you plan to issue any endorsements in the primary season, either here in District 1 or for the Attorney General or the governor's slot or any of these Florida races?
Yeah, well, first of all, I've known Matt for a long time, and he worked for me at one time when I was in the legislature in Florida. So, I'm supporting him. I think he's done a good job as a member of the House, and I hope people will reelect him. I don't know his opponent. I'm nothing against him, but Matt's done a good job. And I think, and hopefully he'll be back here, and I expect he will be. I talked to the president last night. We had like a 30-minute conversation. I can't be there because we have votes, and we're working on stuff here. We're going to, in fact, have to authorize the flood insurance. That's something that'll matter to some people, especially in Pensacola.
Yeah.
Closer to the water. Flood insurance expires tonight. So you won't be able to do real estate closings without it in some properties. So we got to get that passed today at noon and then get it over to the president. We're still working on this budget. We have a circuit court judge that we need to confirm today. So I spoke to the president for like 30 minutes on the phone about a couple things last night. And one of them he asked me about was the race. And I said, he knows this. I've known Adam for a long time. I've known Ron for quite a bit of time. I'm a big fan of both of them. So when you have two people running that you kind of like and you feel like either one of them would be a great governor, either one of them would do a good job, either one of them can win, you kind of let the voters decide it. And that's what I'm going to do there. I think no matter who wins that primary, we got a good candidate for governor.
Well, very good. I know you got to go and got to do other things, but I did want to also mention, we spent a lot of time last week talking about your symposium that you kind of led over at the Heritage Foundation about the deep fakes, and I'm really glad you're paying attention to that. That is that's a terrifying thing to imagine, from the political dimension all the way to the business and the employment dimension and even just personal relationships. So kudos to you for bringing that up. And, I assume you're continuing to work on the DETER Act with Russia. Any movement on that in the Senate so far?
Yeah, look, that's about the future, right? What happened in 2016, and I already said, I'll say this again, okay? Maybe Putin had a preference at the end for Donald Trump, but that's not why he did it. He wanted the next president of the United States to face a cloud of controversy, no matter who it was, so they would be distracted. And you would have to say that that's what's happened. The president's been dealing with this for a year and a half. So Mueller's doing his investigation. I tell everybody, I've told this to the president, let this thing play out, let the truth come out. That's the best thing that could happen for the president. Trust me on this. The best thing that could happen for him is that investigation come out with all the truth and everything be settled there. And then, the Intelligence Committee, we're doing our work that has nothing to do with collusion per se. It has to do with what the Russians, collusion's Mueller's thing. And, all I can say about collusion is I can guarantee you the way Washington is today, if there was a scintilla of evidence, they would have been leaked all over the place by now. That's all I'll say about that.
Yeah.
On the Intelligence Committee, we're doing our work in that regard. what about the future? What if Russia does it? What if in 2020 Russia decides, you know what, we're going to screw around with Donald Trump because he's hit us hard on sanctions, and I don't like, he hasn't been as nice as we hoped he would be. We're going to go after him now. We're going to try to get a socialist elected president of the United States. And they start messing around with our elections. What's going to be the consequences for that? And that's what Putin needs to know up front. Because when he sits down and decides, do I do this or not do this, he needs to know what the price is. And he needs to compare the price to the benefit. And the price has to be greater than the benefit. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to put a law in place that says, this is the price you will pay if you do this. So we want to do it right. We want to make sure it's responsible, doesn't have unintended consequences, and that's what we're working through. And I think we're going to come up with a bill that has Republican and Democrat support, that can pass the House, that can pass the Senate, and then the President can sign.
Very good. Senator Marco Rubio from the great state of Florida.
I got bad news for Pensacola. I got to tell you this. I don't know real quick, but people have figured it out. People are asking me. I know a couple of people that say they want to move there, so I'm sorry. You guys are going to have more people and more traffic. We tried to keep it a secret from the rest of the country as long as we could, but they have figured it out. I don't know if you've noticed, but more and more people are either moving down there or want to move down there, so we're going to have to do a little bit more.
You couldn't work harder to keep them in Miami?
Good, I'm glad people.
You couldn't work harder to keep them in Miami? No? Nothing for us there? All right.
Yeah, we got plenty of people in Miami.
I know, right?
But Pensacola, the secret is out. And I swear to you, in the last 2 months, I've had like 4 people tell me they're moving there because they for some reason, either traveled there for business and just loved it. So, we'll have to figure out. We got to get you guys more roads now. It's going to be a little crowded.
Yeah, no, that's 100% true. Senator Marco Rubio, thanks for the time this morning. We appreciate it, sir.
All right, thank you. Look forward to being there in person soon.
Absolutely.